she's seeing literally in front of her eyes as I'm bleeding to death, and they can't stop the blood flow. And he took me to the bathroom, and that's where he raped me. Somehow, I'm just this terrible person who deserved it. I said, God, if you heal me right now, I will get up, get baptized, and I will never question healing. Began to watch pornography. What would people say when they find out? The thickness of the presence of the spirit of death. I know that Jesus enters my room. My name is Anastasiya, and this is his story. I was born in Ukraine in 1984 into a Christian family. And so I was raised by a pastoral parents in a Christian atmosphere in home. And so just a quick story on how I came to be. In 1984, my mother goes into labor. She's taken to the hospital. This is December. It's snowing, it's cold. So she has her fifth, at that time, child. The doctors receive me, and unfortunately, I was not alive because I suffocated on the umbilical cord. And so the doctors begin to work on me. And while the other team of doctors is working on my mom, and so my mom realizes that she has not heard a sound from me. And so she raises herself up, and with the cry of her heart, she says, "Oh God," and that's when breath enters my lungs. And I come back to life. And so that's how my journey began. About 2 months into my life, I become sick again, and it almost claims my life. I'm in the hospital. The doctors are fighting for my life. It's some kind of blood disorder disease. And she's seeing literally in front of her eyes as I'm bleeding to death, and they can't stop the blood flow. So my mom makes the decision where she just wraps me in the coat, her winter coat, and we escape the hospital. She takes me home, and with faith and prayers, she just begins that process of at-home restoration of my life. And God miraculously, yet again, brings me to life, saves me. And interestingly, 2 years later, that comes back. But this time, my mom is very determined, and she faced these things before, so with prayer and faith, she fights for my life, which I am eternally grateful to her for that. She's an amazing. So growing up in this Christian family, we were really taught and raised in faith. One of the things our mom constantly did with us is that we would read the Bible for hours and hours at a time. And if you, whoever is listening, grew up in Ukraine back in those days, or Russia, there was a time when they would conserve the energy and turn off the lights, and we would be without lights. And how can you read the Bible if you don't have the lights? So just to let you know what kind of faith that we grew up with. We would sneak out into the room, and we would pray and come back and be like, the lights are about to be turned on. And just like that, the lights come back on. The rest of the town has no lights, but we do in our house. That was something that the Lord had blessed us with, that faith that our parents installed in us. And so about in 1996, we began the preparation to move to America. We already had a few aunts and uncles living here, so the preparation began. This was already when we were a family of 9. And so for those who have immigrated to America, you know that once you come here, once you step off the plane, you begin the process of health checkups and all of these things. So around December beginning, or a little bit to the middle, I can't remember for sure, one of the times that we came to our clinic to see the pediatrician that was overlooking, us and things like that. It was actually, he called my mom in with me just by myself, because he said either he had insufficient analysis or he lost something or something like that. And this was the time when he asked my mom and my aunt, who was translating for us, to stay in the waiting room, and he took me to the bathroom, and that's where he raped me. After that had happened, as we were walking out, he said something in a face. I couldn't understand the words, obviously, we just came to America. But he said something with his face so stern that I knew that this is not to be spoken of ever. Also, because I grew up in a very conservative religious background, things like that weren't even permitted to speak about. You weren't even supposed to do a deed before the Sunday because you'll have to confess your sins. That was so taboo and unholy that even speaking wasn't right. So when this happens to me, first of all, I don't even understand truly what it is. And secondly, obviously, I'm not going to speak about it. I am uncertain on the exact date when it happened, but this was from 12 turning 13. Either this was still before my birthday, which is December 11, either had already turned 13. So about 12, 13 when it happened. Yeah. And so from that point, I go into 2-year silence. I was not able to speak about it. I tried to just kind of suppress it within me, but it wasn't really happening for me like that. I began, that was the beginning where it entered this fight with suicidal and becoming, in a sense, an addiction to me, because for the next 24 hours, 24 years is where the struggle began. And so how it came out was actually because we were a large family. I shared a room with my sister, and one night we were just kind of talking back and forth, and getting a little bit heated up in our conversations. And we did this, well, who suffered more? And I said, well, you haven't been raped like I was. And little do I know, she tells that to my parents. And in the morning when I come out, they're waiting for me. They have already called our pastor and had already set up a meeting with him. So we go to church to meet up with the pastor. He gets the police involved. But unfortunately, because this is 2 years later, that clinic had shortly after the incident or whatever closed down, and the doctor was nowhere to be found. So nothing happened as of that, which was another blow, you could say, to my pain addition, And so this is where the struggle began. I knew this one thing, that committing suicide was not something a Christian person should do, because I knew the outcome. I knew that on the other side, hell was waiting, and I just couldn't bring myself to doing it. But I've tried. Praise God, none of it was successful, because God had a greater thing to do in my life. I just want to make a little side note for the parents. If you take your child to see a doctor, even if it's a pediatrician, we shouldn't be scared of them in a sense, but we have to be cautious. When you're there, make sure you're there with your child everywhere. And if they have to go to the bathroom, please check the bathroom first, and you stand guard on the outside. It's not that you're being fearful that something might happen, but you have your mind at ease that you did everything to protect your child. From my personal, because I do have children. I do have 2 girls and a son now. This struggle with with this addiction to suicide, I guess, began, and it just unraveled. I always had these thoughts that somehow I must have brought it upon myself. Somehow I'm just this terrible person who deserved this. Somehow this was my doing. This was, just I caused it, kind of thing, And it's something that the devil does to us. He would implant these thoughts in us, and he'll try to unravel where it becomes this, just a web, a spider web where you are caught in it. Well, again, coming back to how we were raised in the Christian community, seeking help wasn't something that was approved. It was always said that, just take it to Jesus. Just take it to Jesus and he'll deal with it. Well, yes, he does when it's your spiritual being, and he is able to interfere in any situation, mind or body related also. So outside of that, I suggest seek help. Definitely find at least someone, a friend that you can speak to, that you can confide in. and let them know that, hey, I can't tell you the full details, but I'm struggling with these thoughts. You know, in the Bible, it says that the light, Jesus, the light, came into the world, but darkness loved darkness more because their evil deeds satisfy them. And so that's what happens. The more we are in the depth of darkness, the harder it is for the light to penetrate it. And so when you speak to someone, when you let someone in, that's an opportunity for God to touch your situation and shine His light into it. But unfortunately, that was not something I did or something I came up with at that time. And so one of the things that I did was just my eating habit became really, really terrible. I suffered with just horrendous stomach pains because of my eating disorder. I remember on December 14th is when I was baptized, and I remember in the morning we woke up and I knew that this was a Sunday, I'm going to be baptized, and I just have this horrible pain in my stomach. I can't even lift myself off of the couch, and my whole family gathered around me and they just began to pray and proclaim healing. And inside I had this conversation with the Lord. I've always had that. I've always had this inside of me that I would speak to the Lord. And I told Him, I said, God, if you heal me right now, I will get up, get baptized, and I will never question healing. And just like that, He did that. All the pain went away. And I came that Sunday to church and I was baptized, and that was a new beginning in sorts for me. You know, my inner healing didn't take place at that time. My soul was still hurting. You know, my mind was still going through this darkness, and I couldn't even truly understand how and why and what is happening. You know, I've asked God multiple times the question, why would you let that happen to me? Why? What did I do? How did I deserve that? How did I earn something like that? You know, that this would happen to me and they would send me in this spin-off. And when I say suicide addiction, these thoughts were constantly on my mind, but I didn't constantly act upon them. So what happened is I began to just put myself down. My self-worth was nothing, even lower than that, because I could look at a bug and have more compassion towards it than I did for myself. So just a growing forgiveness towards myself. And not that I blamed God, but I definitely asked Him, why would you let that happen to me? Why would you let that happen to a child? And we do have those questions. And you know, later in life, God actually answered that question to me. And it was a very sobering answer that He gave me, but that came in the place where I was already healed. So continuing with the story, at about the age of 18, I meet my future husband. We become friends. I met him at a church, actually an interesting story. I come into church and I just have this outline of the back of his head. He's got these pretty blonde, ashy curls, and the Lord outlines him for me and He says, that's your husband. I'm like, oh, well, thank you for informing me, because our mom taught us well to pray for your future spouse from a very young age. And so at the end of the service, my best friend introduces me to him, and long story short, we begin to see each other. We begin this courting, dating process. And when things began to get a little bit serious in our relationship, I shared with him my story. I shared with him the details and everything, because I knew that coming into this relationship moving forward, he needed to know what he's getting into. I didn't still understand all the pain attachments that were coming with it. I just kind of knew that was it. That's what happened, that's what it is, you know, take it as it is, you know. But all the deep feelings I was still processing them, because still young mind. And so his initial reaction to it was he kind of laughed. And so he didn't take it seriously, which kind of in a sense hurt me or added to the hurt. But love is stronger than hurt. And so we just began a continual process. At that same time is when his sister with her husband moved to America, and they began their first, I would say, Pentecostal charismatic church, just the faith-based, speaking in tongues, seeing the miracles, believing for healing and restoration and things like that church. And so slowly we switched to going there. And with this church, we had prayer camps, I guess, or we call them encounters, where you go out for about 3 days and you just spend time in prayer and confession, and you have people pray over you and anoint you and things like that, and deliverance and healing happen. So I went there as well, and one of the things I did is that I sought healing for what had happened to me. And it seemed like I was able to forgive the person who did that to me and release them. And in a sense, that brought a little bit of ease in my life. But I couldn't figure out why it was so easy for me to jump back to self-accusation and trying to, in a sense, harm myself up to death. I couldn't figure out that this pattern actually had something bigger, stronger behind it. And so I, continued just growing in faith and seeking the Lord. And I tell you this for sure, the closer you are with Him, all these things fall away. Because there was a time in my life when we were serving at a church that had a rehabilitation center, and I was ministering to the women, and I was able to share with them what happened to me and relate to their situation, and able to pray for them and just bless them in that way. But my pain wasn't truly dealt with, because that was just one aspect of it. But there was that other aspect, that my choice was that I was still a dirty thing that needed to die. That we sometimes think that we are able to save our own selves, that we could be that sacrificial lamb, but it's only Jesus. He's the only sacrificial lamb that is pure, that is able to wash all our sins away, even cleanse our conscience of all condemnation. And so I think all the other pain was beginning to resonate with me for a purpose that I had developed a victim's mentality. And I always saw myself as a victim, to a point that at church, somebody didn't say hello to me, and it was like a subconscious thing now, that I would automatically assume that I caused it, I'm the problem, and even to a place, I began to this mental mantra, continuously saying to myself, whenever there's a hardship in my life, to say things, I'm a problem. No, when there's no me, no problem. It's like this Russian thing that we hear say, нет человека, нет проблемы. If that person doesn't exist, there's no problem. And so I began to just imprint that in the back of my mind, just continuously, whenever a hardship comes. And so anytime we would, in our marriage, anytime a situation would rise up, automatically I would take it to heart, because my heart was positioned in a place where I'm the victim. I'm continuously going to be a victim. It's a thing. It's my label. It's my stamp. It's my new middle name. Anastasiya, victim, коллюжный kind of thing. And so to say that it added to it, at that time, it seemed like in any situation that arose, not just in the marriage, with friends, at church, it seemed like it was directed at me, like I am just this spot that everything is hitting, like I'm this target. And so, but I realized that the closer I am with the Lord, the more time I spend with Him. I would rise up early in the morning and spend hours in just prayer, and I began to walk on the streets and talk to people, tell them how much the Lord loves them and how much He desires them and wants them. And then I step out in faith and I begin to pray for them and just see these miraculous things happen, and just walking in faith. And it seemed like my mental state was getting farther and farther and farther away, but I didn't realize that it required a continuation in that state. And so slowly I began to drift away. I would not get up to pray as much anymore. I would neglect reading the word, and just slowly, and life happened. I had my third child, in a sense, going through a postpartum, which kind of happened much later. And so just busyness with the new baby and everything else just kind of slowly started drifting. And I came to a place where I realized that I don't know who I truly am, because all my life I have been taught to be a certain way. You as a Christian, you have to be a certain way. You see, for me, it seemed like it was a role I was playing, being a Christian. At that moment, as I drifted away, it seemed that that was just a role I played as a Christian, but who am I truly? And so I began mind-baffling search of myself, not even realizing that I would come to almost losing myself completely. I substituted the reading of the Word with very explicit pornographic, erotic books, novels, and began to watch pornography and tried to find that some kind of temporary satisfaction in that, seeing if I could find myself in that. I began to exercise very, very hard because I wanted to look a certain way. I began a very harsh relationship with food that led me down a path of anorexia that caused me some very, very harsh health issues that landed me in the hospital. But at least I was looking good, and I began to get attention. I would post my exercise routines and things like that on social media, and I began to draw attention from the opposite sex of me, and that seemed like something pleasant. It's something that I wanted to look in. It started very innocent, as in, oh, thank you for the comment, or thank you, to where now I'm receiving private messages from these people and answering to them, and I'm having these hidden conversations with these people. Also, one of the things is that I began going out a lot, and alcohol was part of that as well. I began with a friend just hitting the bars and, just sitting there, nothing dangerous or anything. Of course, we'll get at the bar, you'll get all kinds of attention, and it's something that I was hungering for, that it seemed like, my husband, he just doesn't understand the attention I need. I just want this appreciation from other people and things like that, and it began to really spin a web in my mind to where it got really, really dark in there. No longer was I able to look at a situation and clearly think on it, but it was like, well, how does that make you feel? And when you begin to base decisions on how you feel, we know that our feelings are not to be trusted. And so with that came thoughts and some meetings that were not right, and it affected, of course, our marriage at home. And at this same time, my husband was going through his own life struggles and things like that. Of course, how do you respond to a wife who is not present in my mind, in a sense, in my right mind, not present in the home? My children are being neglected, and I'm very grateful to my sister who noticed that, and she began to help out with my children. And just, it's like literally I began to lead a double life, where at home I would be, just secluded. I would hide to read. I would just binge read these novels, because at least I could live a different life through these people, in the book. And not understanding how much that was actually adding to the darkness in my mind. And when I came out of it, I was like, wow, my Lord, I truly lived Romans chapter 1, where with my mind, I did not glorify God, and God just left me to my own demises, to my own desires and things like that. But He was always with me. He was continuously present with me. And at that time, I did. So this is where the double life kind of comes in, where so happy and joyous looking when I'm at church. I'm pretending that I'm still, that raising my hands to worship, but inside I'm slowly dying. But I actually, towards the very end, so this lasted for 3.5 years. Towards the end, I was just disgusted with myself that I was coming to a place where I couldn't even bring myself to fake anymore. There were times where I would be visiting our friends, and we would still, the same group of friends, will be having conversations and discussions, and inside of me, all I want to do is just slap my hands on the table and say, you guys, I'm a fake. If you only knew what's running through my head right now, if you only knew. But those were the times when I would put even better, bigger smile on and just fake it till you make it, not knowing that making I was into hell, And just this shame of what would people say when they find out, And that's the biggest trap the enemy sets for us. Yes, I understand there's been time where you shared something with someone and it was, just taken out of context or whatever and just been spilled everywhere. You were looking for help, but instead you received wrong publicity. And I get it, I've had that happen before. But when you reach out truly in a state like this, find that somebody that you can trust, that you can speak to, that you can sit down and say, I'm a fake. This is what's really happening. Oh, believe me, it's hard. I know it's hard. I was there. I didn't do it. I wish I could. I wish I found the courage inside of me to just say, enough is enough. It seemed like it was an all of a sudden thing, but it was a process, slowly drifting away, where, oh, I forgot to pray today when's the last time I prayed? Kind of thing. And it's just drifting away because you begin to I began to focus on myself. I became the God of myself, and I needed to please me in search of myself and who I am, my identity, and all of these things, because all I knew is that I went from under my father to under my husband, and now I'm a mother, and all of these, requirements from me and things like that. And it seemed like I never had the chance to realize who I am. And so that was a slow process, where I starved my spirit and fed my flesh. And so one of the things that began to happen is, as I am exercising, getting into shape, I'm looking better, this idolization of how I look became a big thing for me. I began to dress a certain way, more revealing and provocative and things like that. One of the things that I began to do is, we had many outings, and in Slavic community, obviously you eat a lot. So I would eat and then I would go to the bathroom and just make myself throw up and, continue with that for, I think it was at least 1.5 years that I continued doing that, which really messed up my health. And in a sense, the way I hid it, because you would know when you're at a party and you go throw up, your eyes show that you went through something. I would just have a little extra alcohol to say, well, it's that doing to me, just kind of masquerading it by something else. But it took a hit, it hit my health really badly. And this one day that I woke up and I had some pain in my stomach, I still went for a run, and I came home and I began to go in and out of consciousness. So by nature, I have very high pain tolerance. So if I say I have a headache, it's a horrible migraine in relation to just a normal person. So my pain was so severe that I'm losing conscience now. And so my husband, he drives me to the hospital. I'm in and out of consciousness. He's driving there frantic and just, I don't know what's going through his mind because I'm in and out. So he brings me to the hospital. I'm out. In the wheelchair, they rolled me in. I remember coming to it that I had all of these things connected to me, because My heart rate was dropping, my blood pressure was really low. They just had to kind of go into this preparation in case they need to resuscitate me. I just remember coming to it just to let them know that this is my gallbladder. If anything, they should look at that this was my gallbladder. And so for sure, they gave me something that just shocked my system. It brought me back, since they already knew what to look for. It brought me back, and we began the process of having a surgery for the removal of the gallbladder. And interesting situation, encounter that I had. The day that the surgery was scheduled, they usually will you in about half an hour before the surgery into pre-operational room. So as we come downstairs and the elevator doors open in this pre-operation room, I physically felt the thickness of the presence of the spirit of death. Just so in fearful shock from this presence here that I couldn't even, like, my mind was spinning out of control. I couldn't even put a place to it. This was some kind of fearful darkness. And as I'm laying there, all of a sudden, I know that Jesus enters my room, and he stands at the head of my bed. He lays his hand on my head, and I literally feel my body sinking down from the weight of his beautiful hand. The warmth and the love that's just coming out of it. And he begins to stroke me on the forehead with his thumb. And I open my eyes, and right here in front of my bed, I see an angel of God standing. He's not standing on the ground, but he's hovering. And I can see the gold shimmering in his gown that he's wearing, in his wings, And this just immeasurable peace comes over me, that I knew that everything is going to be okay, and although this is still in this process of my identity crisis where I'm trying to search out who I am and trying to, in a sense, lose myself here, Jesus comes in. And with him comes this peace. And the surgery goes on, everything is fine, everything is all right. I come out of it, and you would say something like this would just snap me to reality. Actually, it didn't. I somehow even forgot that happened. There were times that I would remember and I would share with my friends that happened. But at the same time, I would stop the story, because the next thing I wanted to say is that, and just so you guys know, I'm in the process of murdering myself, kind of thing, because my mind is so divided. This battle between my soul and my spirit happening, but God was fighting for me. So about a Friday before that happens, I am at a friend's home group, and there's a guest there, a friend of ours who I've known also, and he is sharing his life journey, his stories, how he's just so in love with God, how he's out praying for people on the streets, how he's fasting, and all of a sudden a delivery happens in his brother's life. He comes to Christ out of this complete and total darkness, and I'm sitting there, and my spirit is relating to that, because just a little bit ago, God was doing the same thing through me, and not understanding that was a divine connection that God had made. And so he just continued sharing the story, and I began to share a few stories from back when I was, and that spark ignited. Actually, that was the first time in about 3 years that I was able to pray in tongues. It's a very big thing for me. If you find me talking to myself, that's me praying in tongues. But during that time, I couldn't. I just shut down the spirit in me. And so that was the first time I was able to pray in tongues. And so, again, you would have thought this would be your wake up moment, No, that next day, I don't even know what was happening. I just remember that I was out almost the whole day. I would just take these out trips. I'll go shopping. I'll go walking somewhere. I'm just abusing my body with exercise and all of these things. And I'd made a decision that, enough is enough. This is it. I've become such a burden to everyone that it's time. This is it. So since God is outside of time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go on Sunday, pray, ask for forgiveness, and then do what I'm supposed to do what I have to do kind of thing, like that conversation that Judas had with Jesus. But Jesus wasn't saying that to me. He only said that to Judas. Whatever you've decided, go ahead and do it. But Jesus is on our side saying, no, allow me to make the next decision and step. And so that Sunday, I'm sitting in church, as always, pretending like I'm very attentively listening, while at this time, as the preacher is speaking, God begins to speak to me in my mind. And I've always had those conversations with him where he speaks in your own voice, and it's him. It's different because there are three voices in our head. That's the voice of God, our own voice, and the voice of the enemy. And usually when you hear the voice of the enemy, that brings on fear unless he's masquerading himself as the angel of light and he gives you false hope. And then there's the voice of yourself, where usually you've adapted his language and you condemn yourself. But then there's the voice of our Savior, of our Jesus, who's in us, that sounds like this pure golden love to you. And so he begins to speak to me. Now, in this 3.5-year journey of self-search, I've had these conversations within my head with God that, God, I do not deny you. I know I can't do that. I know where I'm headed where I do that. So, but me and you, we're not on talking terms, okay? Just so you understand, I know you're out there, I'm down here, but we're not on talking terms. So, okay, mind your own business, I mind my own business, kind of. When I'm done, I'll get to you kind of thing. We have those conversations within us. And God is not condemning them, but he's patiently waiting for you to say, come. And so he begins to speak to me, and he says the words to me, you lost hope. And I begin to reason in my mind, because to me that sounded like you denied me. And I'm like, no, I've never spoken those words. No. And then he says, I am your hope. And in a split second, everything just aligned. Like you go to a chiropractor and they do that decompression of your spine, and all of a sudden it just click, 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 everything gets into right place. That's what it did. All of a sudden, just this darkness lifted off of my mind, and everything made sense. Everything that was wrong got separated, and everything that was right got separated. And I could see a clear separation between the two, because it had gotten to such a mingle within my mind that, just things were, that's okay. If that makes you happy, that's okay. Like you don't even rationalize things anymore. You just kind of go with the flow, And so he begins to speak to me in that very small, still voice, just saying that I am your hope. And my heart began to overflow with this love, this passion, this compassion that he had towards me. And I couldn't even explain what was going on. I just continued listening to the sermon, just tears are rolling. I can't explain it, what just happened, but this was a true encounter with God the Father. And so I go home, I can't share anything. I'm just rethinking, dealing with it in a sense, just kind of trying to understand what is all going on. And as I'm running on my elliptical, that was the place where I would usually listen to some worldly music that related to me, that stroked my ego and my situation and things like that. But now here, it's disgusting to me. I turn on worship music, and as I'm running and I'm just talking with God, and I'm just having this fellowship and communication with him, and all of a sudden this condemnation just overtakes me. Like, how could you? How could you? You come from a generational believers. My grandfather was a pastor, the grandfather before him, and father and grandfather, pastors. You've been in the ministry literally since I was 6 years old. My father used to take me with him for visitations, for praying over the sick, for delivering communion to those who weren't able to participate. I've been in the ministry. I've been serving in church all my life. I've been out on the streets praying for people. I had faith to believe for raising of the dead. It's an interesting story with that as well, because our first child, at 15 weeks of development, development died, and me and my husband, we had faith that if our pastor comes and he prays for her, she will be healed. But we put our faith into a person rather than into God. But that didn't get resolved how we wanted. But that gave me so much boldness to continue to press in and pray. And so, I'm on the streets, I'm praying, I'm ministering to these women at the rehabilitation, I'm doing all this, doing that. And then, I just go through this time where I am completely total opposite, where I abuse my body with eating and the physical exercise. My mind is being polluted with all of these pornographical things. I'm at a place where I emotionally completely cheated on my husband, and I'm just, how could I? This condemnation, heaviness just drops on me. And right at that same time, the song by Elevation Worship is playing, "Oh, come to the Father. His arms are open wide. Forgiveness was bought, paid for with precious blood of Jesus Christ." And yet again, God speaks to me in this voice. He says, condemnation is the devil's handcuffs. Put them off. They don't belong to you anymore. And so that's what I literally did. I paused on my elliptical. I said, devil, no, I've ripped them off. I take them off. I am a slave to righteousness, to Jesus, no longer to you. And so I speak to whoever's watching this and listening this right now. I just speak to your life that condemnation has no power or charge over you. Devil is illegally binding you if he's doing that. So I break that off by the precious blood of Jesus that was spilled on Calvary. You are free. You were bought with a price, and you are a child of King, a victorious God who overcame evil by his precious love. So I speak freedom into your life. And so as I am there, I'm doing this, I'm ripping these handcuffs off, and just this purity comes on me. This, God, I'm yours. I am yours. And so this was a process of restoration and reconciliation. And so that year was the very first time I was so eager, because that happened on November 14th. December 11th was coming up my birthday, and that was the very first time that I wanted to celebrate my birthday. Because every year since about 12, 13 years old, when that had happened around my birthday, every year around my birthday, I just wanted to seclude myself away from people and come up with a new way. How can I take my life? Because I'm so undeserving to live. And so that year, I wanted to celebrate life. I truly, relive that moment when I was born dead and my mother recognizes and says, "Oh God," and breath comes into my lungs. At that moment, I truly relived that in my already established and conscious mind, where I realized it's the breath of God within my lungs. He's the only one sustaining me. That's what he's doing to you. Every breath you take, you're breathing in the Ruach, the Spirit of God. Yahweh, his name, when you truly speak it in the dialect, it's as if you're breathing in and out. That's who he is. He's the living breath. And so he breathed upon me. And so that year, girls from our church, they decided to make a birthday celebration for me. And so as I'm driving there, I wanted to surprise them also. I made this tray of sushi and just beautifully arranged it, and I was going to surprise them. And as I'm driving there, the Lord begins to speak to me. He says that he will redeem the time that I lost, because I've cried out to him that, God, I can't believe I lost three and a half years just ripped out. I could have been serving for you. I could have been advancing. And he said, I will redeem those years. And also he said, in your vulnerability, I will bring healing. And so I was like, I don't understand what you're saying. And he says, share your testimony. That's hard to do. That's hard. It's hard to be vulnerable. But he said, I will bring healing. I said, okay, God, if you heal me through this, I will share. As we are seated at the table, we've had the tea, we've had some conversations, and Holy Spirit begins to nudge on my heart. He's like, it's time, it's time, it's time. So I'm just overwhelmed with all the emotions, because these are the ladies that I'm surrounded by who've seen me walk through this path. And I've tried to hide as much as possible that I'm still that same bubbly person as always was, but it was noticeable, especially towards the end, where I was I just couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. I was just so full of death. I couldn't do it anymore. And so my sister, she was sitting next to me, and she just puts her hand on my arm and she says, do it. And so I began to share my testimony. Of course, at that time, I got different reactions. I had some who were excited for me and for the changes that were happening, but also who I knew were changed. Their outlook on me changed by that testimony. And that's okay too. I am responsible for saying the truth. How it's received is up to the receiver. And so that was the beginning. When God said, in your vulnerability, I will bring healing, I thought, well, God, if you heal me, that's amazing. But then he clarified this and he said, no, not just you. I will bring healing to many. So right now, whoever is under the sound of my voice, healing has come to your house. The healer, Jesus the Christ, through my voice has come to your situation, into your situation, has come to your help. Just simply as you can, say, Jesus, I'm hurting. Jesus, I can't do it. It's hard. Who, if not him, can understand that? The burden he took on himself, all the whipping that was placed on him, all that torn out flesh from his body, he took it upon himself. He took your pain, your sickness, disease, whatever it is, be that physical, be that mental, be that spiritual. He took it upon himself. He did it with joy and pleasure, knowing what was said before him. You were said before him. He was seeing you. He was loving you at that time. And right now, he just wants to touch your heart. He wants to touch your body, if that is, touch your mind, and just bring his light, bring his healing, bring his just anointing and love. He does that because he loves. That is the only reason that he does that. It has nothing to do with who you were or anything else, but he sees your true value, and he wants his love to restore you. That's what he did for me. I'm a testimony of that. I'm a walking testimony of that. And God has given me an opportunity to touch so many other lives. Take up that opportunity. Just receive it. Receive his healing. And it's a continuous process. There are days when I think back, just last week I celebrated my 40th birthday, and the day before I was sitting, it was a bit of a hard day for me. I was just kind of thinking, not in the sense of past, but also in the sense of past. I was thinking and dwelling on how many times God was with me, how many things he watched me go through, how many times he held my hand, he held me up, he carried me when I wasn't able to walk anymore, stand. He carried me, how many times? And so, like I said before, I asked him the question, why would you let that happen? When that clarity came, when that clarity in mind came, and I was asking again that question, God, why did that happen to me? And his answer really stunned me. He said, why not? I said, what do you mean, why not? He said, I equipped you to stand in face of this trial so that those who aren't able to stand, you'll stand right next to them. And so here I am standing next to you. He's a loving Father. We live in the corrupt world where things happen, where evil is, and those who submit their will to evil one do evil. But those who submit their will to God will bring life and healing. And so that's how he works. He sees us through this situation we walk through so that we can walk with those who aren't able to stand. Once I spoke to my husband and I told him, I can't believe that I'm such a weak person that I'm trying to take my own life. And he said these words. He said, no, a weak person would have done it already. It takes a strong person to go through 24 years of continuously coming to suicidal thoughts and taking on some actions to not to go through with it. And I was like, I don't understand that. He says, yeah, that's how it is. And so that's truly, I'm beginning to see that's how it is. We are made to support and love each other and carry each other's burdens. And that's what I want to do for you. Carry your burden as well. I want to ask you, whoever listened to it, is that you like this video, you subscribe to this channel to get even more testimonies like this. And if this was helpful for you and you think this could be helpful for someone else, please share. You have my sincere permission to share my testimony, because when the light of God comes into a situation, darkness has to flee. When God said, let there be light, darkness fled, and there was light. So like, share, subscribe, and just allow others to receive the healing as well. I would ask him that this testimony would not be in vain, that it would save as many lives as possible.